Hello, everyone. My name is Barbara Tien with Project Kin, and it is a distinct honor to welcome all of you here today for this really very special episode of Kathy's Corner. Kathy's Corner is part of the Project Kin series where we focus on the artifacts, the stuff, the photos, the materials, and today the postcards that we have inherited in our family collection that sometimes they're our own memorialized elements, but sometimes they're the things that have been passed down among from our ancestors. Kathy Stone, the magical host of our Kathy's Corner series, is going to be introducing our special guests today, and I will step out of the way and let you go ahead and get started. We'll have six speakers, very tight for time. So we're going to collect the questions and comments to the very end. So I do ask for your patience as we go through. So for that reason, if you're not speaking, I do ask that you go on to mute. So with that, I'm out of here. Thank you again. Over to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Barbara. Welcome, everyone. I am really happy to welcome all of our guests today, and thank you so much for participating in this because I basically get to do not much in this Kathy's Corner today. So thanks for coming to our special holiday edition, I guess we could call it, of Kathy's Corner. And we're going to talk about postcards today, the stories, the history, the art, and everything else around different postcards. And from what I've seen the postcards, and you're in for a real treat today. So I'm going to get right to it so we have time, and I'm going to welcome our first speaker, Jill Swenson. Jill's written a book coming out next June about the place where her Swedish immigrant grandparents homesteaded on ceded Red Lake Reservation land in northern Minnesota in 1903. Since 1968, when Jill purchased a postcard of Kakaygeesick, the Ojibway, yeah, I do the first word right and then I can't approach Ojibway, post-spiritual leader she met as a 10-year-old visiting relatives there. Jill has collected postcards since, and she's here today to talk about her newest acquisition, an image of her great-grandmother's sister at her spinning wheel from 1913. So I will share my screen. Where'd my controls go? Oh, there they are. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, there. Let's move to slide 2. There we go. We did that pretty well.
So you mentioned that postcard that I collected in 1968. I'm holding it up next to my face, right? It's of Kakaygeesick, who was an Ojibway spiritual leader I met when I was 10 years old. Anyways, that's a tourist postcard. But this is my most recent acquisition, is the top postcard on the left. The back side is in the upper left-hand corner, and it's difficult to read what that says, but amazingly enough, I figured out what that was. I recognized the handwriting enough to know that it says Mrs. Albert Hessler, Roosevelt, Minnesota. And that postcard I found on eBay, and you'll notice that the upper right-hand corner was chewed off shortly after I purchased it by my dog. Right, not helpful. Nonetheless, the photograph is pretty interesting. And I came to this photograph first through the postcard below. I found the postcard below of that schoolhouse. It's a one-room schoolhouse where both my mother and my grandfather attended, and my great-grandfather had been involved in building the schoolhouse and the church across the road from it. And this schoolhouse didn't have well, one, it's white, and the schoolhouse in my living memory has always been red, and it had an extension on the back, so it was much larger, right? There were 40 students in attendance when my mother was going in the 30s, and there was a front entryway that had been added on. So I barely recognized it, but I found it this summer in the county museum, Lake of the Woods County. It turns out that this property that my great grandparents had was actually in Roseau County, but the schoolhouse and most of the community was on the county line. And so I had not checked the photo archives of the other county and discovered that schoolhouse photo. And that schoolhouse photo says on the back that it's my first year of school, 1913, 6 years old, and it's attributed to Agnes Branham. Agnes Branham is the daughter of Mrs. Albert Hessler. Agnes Hessler Branham, right? A second cousin of mine recognized right away. Oh, Agnes, I know Agnes. That was right, Agnes Branham, right? Because there were several other things in the collection that had must have been in her personal possession. And Hesslers were the next door neighbors. They had the homestead immediately adjacent to my great grandparents. And my great grandparents had moved up to this area on Lake of the Woods, Minnesota, in 1903 when Red Lake Reservation land opened up to homestead claims because Emma Hessler, Mrs. Albert Hessler, right, had moved up there with her husband, and they convinced the family down in Marine St. Croix, which is near Stillwater, Minnesota, to move north for timber. In this photograph of the woman, Mrs. Hessler, I did a kind of a close up there on the right. It shows Agnes holding two dolls, looks like with porcelain heads. And there's wool yarn over that spinning wheel, and she's holding that spinning wheel. And immediately when I found this postcard, I just gasped because I'm a spinner, and that looks a lot like my wheel and me in some respects. And no one in my family, even though they're crocheters and knitters and needle pointers and weavers and every other kind of fiber arts in my lineage, I had never known that there had been a spinner. And I felt at that moment I touched my emotional inheritance there, right? That I came to this Swedish tradition. Somehow it found me. Anyways, the picture below is a close-up of the students. And because I had the first schoolhouse photo and now the second, I was able to identify Agnes as the girl on the lower left in the close-up of the students in that first year, 1913 class. The teacher, I was able to find her name. I'm not sure who the man was. We think it might be the carpenter of the building, Mr. Peterson, who constructed the schoolhouse, who was also a neighbor. But in the process, I also learned that another one of their neighbors, right, who grew up with my mom, had become the county historian in Lake of the Woods, right, in Baudette, Minnesota, which is sort of, we always think of that as the next county over, right? They were always more identified with Wara. So it was really quite a fun expedition to try and, find other things once I had found that piece in the county museum, to then search online looking for Agnes Branham and Roosevelt, Minnesota, and Mrs. Albert Hessler. And that's how I found the other photograph on eBay. And for 20 bucks, I thought it was a lot of fun to get it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jill. That was wonderful. I'm fascinated by the ladder going up the tree in the bottom picture.
Yes,
I
and you'll notice there's a sawhorse behind, or sorry,
Yeah,
in front of the building. So that's why we think
something
it
was
might be
happening.
the builder.
Great. Thanks so much.
Sure, thank you.
So our next speaker will be Linda Tether, who's from Calgary, Alberta, where I live, and a longtime supporter of both Project Kin and Kathy's Corner. She's done some photo projects with her family art photo archives and helps us all the time with events at Project Kin. Her postcards were actually found by Barbara Tien's niece in a thrift shop in Portland, Oregon. And Barbara mailed them to me, and we shared them on Kathy's Corner because the ones she's going to show in just a moment they were listed a place called Neapolis, Alberta. And I had talked many times about needing to do some research and find out that, because usually I recognize the name of a town in Alberta, but that one, not so much. So Linda jumped in and did some research on those postcards, and she's going to talk about that today. So here are Linda's postcards. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Neapolis is 52 miles north of Calgary, where Kathy and I live. The name means new city. References on wagon train manifest leaving Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in 1855 named Neapolis as a landmark destination. Many people on the settlers' route were migrant workers that worked in local fields for farmers, tending livestock for ranchers, then eventually they became farmers and ranchers themselves. Others, whom were European master cheesemakers, helped Neapolis business for the next 150 years. They made butter, cream, ice cream, and 5 or 6 European cheeses. During the 1980s, the Neapolis Dairy Company exported its renowned cheeses all over the US and Europe. Don't know what happened, whether they sold or quit, but after that there was no more. It became a hamlet about 1860, as close as they can get to when it was um, when it was really came to be. There was a school district in 1897, and the school opened in 1908, and it closed in 1954. It had a post office 1903 to 1914, which isn't a long time. The biggest part of the problem was no railroad to Neapolis. So they missed out on a lot of the things that were going on because the railroad brought the mail and things like that. They did have rural telephones. About 175 residents lived there in its prime. Now about 80 within the area as larger landowners. They had a midwife, Grandma Reimer, who helped deliver at least 2,500 babies over her time spent there. This story, Kathy and I hope we will continue to finally find out some answers. Now, the big house was, well, that's 1907 on the postcard. I'm trying to find out if it's still standing, but you have to go through Didsbury, which is a town to the west a few miles, and they said they couldn't get back to us for a couple of weeks. The other picture is of a lady, and this is what was written on the back of that postcard. It's to a Miss Frances Mosrude. Dear cousin, I should have answered sooner. We live at Neapolis, Alberta, Canada now. We came here last April. We like it fine. The weather has been cold for 2 weeks now, but it is moderating. It was 45 degrees below zero. We lost our baby shortly after we came here. Now we had a third little boy. He is the only one living. He is 2.5 months old. How old are you? Do they call you Frankie? They do me. I am 21 years old. If you know Albertine's address, please let me know. Write and tell me all the news. Send a picture of yourself too. My hubby took this. I think she means the picture. With love, Frankie Barnes, Neapolis, Alberta, Canada. And there's no address for this Miss Frances Mosrude, so we don't know where the postcard was going. But Barbara's, I think it was daughter, found them somewhere, wasn't it, in Oregon? So it went somewhere else for sure. And that's all I know at the moment. Kathy and I are going to keep checking, and one of these days we're going to go there to find
We
out a
are.
little bit more, and we'll continue the story. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. It's fascinating. And you did a really good job reading that writing too.
Yeah, I used a magnifying glass.
Yes. So there's a good example too of a photo postcard. Obviously taken as a portrait and made into a postcard that I talked about on the preview last week. So thanks so much, Linda.
Thank you.
Next up is Dr. Mary Marshall. And Dr. Mary Marshall is a retired educator and the founder curator of Dr. Mary Marshall's collection. Her interest in postcards began when she found a collection of postcards and letters in her ancestral home, and from having a sizable number of postcards returned to her after they were found in an antique store. So, a fascinating story, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Marshall.
Hello. Am I on?
You are on.
Great. Um, there was no way that I or you, Kathy, could have known this, but I am a perfect follow of Jill because she mentions, or one of her postcards mentions Albertine. My aunt's name was Albertine. She's the only other Albertine I've known in the entire world.
Wow.
And my aunt hated her name. We always called her Tina. So let me just give you a quick background on the postcards that you see. I feel really blessed to have found a collection of over 100 postcards and about 75 letters in my ancestral home in Georgia. These two cards, unfortunately, were taken with about 40, 45 others to an antique store. In that, someone removed a piece of furniture from our home in Augusta, Georgia. These cards were wrapped with a garter. I don't know if I'm assuming most of you have seen a garter. So they were wrapped with a garter. And a woman just happened to buy a basket that had these cards in it. At the same time that she bought the basket, I had written an article on my ancestors, including my great grandmother, whose picture you see here on the left, and my great grand aunt, who's on the right with the hat on. The woman in Augusta who found the postcards, she started researching the postcards to see if she could find out who they belonged to. And it just happened that my article appeared, and we were connected through the organization who posted my article. So she returned these cards to me. And I remembered the cards because I remembered seeing them in my grand aunt's room. But, as a child, we were taught you may look, but not touch. So I was thrilled to get these 75 plus cards back. The card at the top is written to Mrs. Mamie Williams. That was my great grandmother. Again, that's her picture on the left. And the card reads, "Dear cousin, I arrived safe and went to work today." And it's signed J.H. I think it's Pope. I have had this card since 1985. I've done a lot of research and I have not been able to identify J.H. Pope. But he says he was my great grandmother's cousin, and maybe one day I'll figure that out. The second postcard is to Mrs. Clara Wright. The woman with the hat on is Mrs. Clara Wright. It was written by your sister. It says, "Hope you are well and hope you will have a happy Easter. All sends love to you, your sister, Mary Williams." Mary Williams is the woman on the left. Mary Williams is also Some people called her Mamie Williams. I don't really understand that, but unfortunately, there's no one alive who could tell me why some people called my great grandmother Mamie and others called her Mary. Um, but this picture of Mary Williams was taken in 1906. It's actually a 16 by 20 portrait. I have the original. And what I did with this portrait, these cards, and many other cards, they are part of a collection that I placed in an archive at Emory University. I had so many, and they were really very old. I didn't have the space to keep them or the correct environment. And while they were written to various members, these are to my great grandmother, but I have some that were written to my grandmother, others to my mother. I even found one, I thought it was written to my mother because we have the same name. When I looked more closely, it said 1959. The more I read it, I realized it was a card that was written to me. That was really super because I was maybe 13, 14, somewhere around there when that card came. And so I don't remember receiving it, but I did know the person who sent it. And I just felt really thankful that my grandmother apparently saved it. So these two cards, along with the pictures that you see, are part of the Dr. Mary Marshall collection at Emory University. Um, I'm just, like I said, really grateful that the person who found the cards in an antique store did some research and thought enough of the person who wrote them to send the cards to me. And we became great friends. We're still friends today. She lives in Georgia, in Augusta. When I go to visit, we make sure that we spend some time together.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Mary. That's just incredible. And I think it was Barbara posted in the chat, or we're seeing a bit of a theme with some of these here of things found in thrift stores and antique stores and other places like that. A good place to look if you're wanting to collect postcards. Well, thanks so
Yes,
much.
apparently. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will be sharing with the video a short video that Dr. Marshall made about about the find of the postcards and everything else. So, okay, gonna move on here. Let's go next. Okay, you should see a black screen now. Barbara and I did this so I could introduce people without distracting you. So the next up is Ellen Thompson Jennings, who's I've met through a company we both hang around in called Forever, I think is where I initially met Ellen. And she's been doing genealogy since she was a teen when she interviewed her great grandmother. One of the postcards that she's sharing today is actually one that belonged to that great grandmother. And Ellen has a website as the Family History Hound. So here's Ellen.
Hi, thank you for having me, Kathy. It's great. So these are, I have a few more postcards, but these are my very favorite ones. They belong to my great grandmother and to my grandmother. I believe I got them. I'm not sure exactly where I got them. I know it was either right after my grandmother died or right after my great grandmother died because she died after. But it was around 1978. And the one on the right that looks a little dirty, I'm going to tell you a story about that one. But the one on the left was owned by my great grandmother, and you can see it was sent during World War One. It was in 1916 that my grandpa Jesse or great grandpa Jesse sent this to his dear wife with birthday greetings from your loving husband, Jess France, June 1916. So I got that one around 1978. And then when my grandmother died, she died in 71. And my parents, or I think my dad didn't really want to deal with the death, and see, neither did my dad's siblings. So they just left everything in the house, if you can imagine. And it would just stayed there, but then vandals went there and they went through everything. Because I remember my grandmother having this trunk, and it was half full of ephemera and letters and all sorts of things like that. So anyways, about 15 years after my grandmother died, we went back to the homestead, and the person who owned the land at that time had bulldozed over the house, and I don't know what was ever left. And I found the postcard on the right in the dirt, and that's why it's all wet and looks wet and dirty. But anyways, it was to my grandmother, and it says, "Dear Gladys, from your loving daddy with best wishes." So she was probably 5 years old when she got this, because her dad was in, at that, she was born at that time, that she would have been 5 if it was around 1916, because he was there till 1918, I think. So anyways, so I found out that these postcards came out early 1900s, and they became very popular during World War I. They cost between 1 and 3 francs. So I looked up last night, how much is a franc? And in Canadian money, it's $29. In US money, that would be probably about $20 nowadays for 1 franc. So if you paid 3 francs, you really were stepping up. So they became popular during World War I, and they continued to be popular during World War II as well, and going on into the 50s. It was very popular in France and in Belgium. So these are one of my treasured postcards. So, and that's basically the story of the postcards.
And those are embroidered, right, Ellen?
Yeah, they're hand embroidered. From what I was reading up about it, the ladies would hand embroider them, and then they would send them to businesses that then would put them on the paper, and then they would distribute them. And so I don't know how they must have got them. Must have been in a larger bundle of mail, because obviously there's no postage or anything like that on there. So yeah. I think it's great, when you talk about thrift stores are great places to get postcards, and eBay, you can put queries on eBay so that you can find your family on eBay. So
it is great. I've found on eBay myself postcards of the ship that not necessarily at the right time frame, but pictures of the ship my grandparents came to Canada on, which we had nothing of that kind of information at all. We just had the name of the ship. So it is time for a new hobby, thrifting.
Oh no, that's my other love. Besides genealogy, I go thrifting all the time.
Probably all of us have that as a hobby too. Thanks so much, Ellen. That's great. Okay, we'll move on. So this is really fun for me, because our next speaker is my cousin Jamie from Edmonton, Alberta, Jamie Blencarn, and her interest in postcards came via her unintentional ending up with possession of many family albums from multiple families, 100+ years of history from her complicated but amazing family tree. Paired with her interest in genealogy, these postcards connect her to her roots, but also help her tie together the details of her own life journal. The stories written between the lines on the backs of these cards tell her more about the people she lost than she expected, and help put a few puzzles together. I am really lucky, because I've actually seen these postcards with my own live and in person. I stole them from Jamie for a little while, but then she made me give them back. But they were in I think there's 3 albums, Jamie will tell us or not. And amazing, just absolutely amazing. If you like old photo albums, you'd love old postcard albums. So we'll get up Jamie's postcards and turn it over to Jamie.
Yeah, so I got to dig into these a little bit last week. I've came in possession of these probably 2020. After my parents passed away, I found these 3 albums in my parents' home. They got them from my great aunt Marguerite M. Morgan, who married my grandfather's brother. And most of these families homesteaded in north central Alberta out in the county of Flagstaff. In fact, one of their sisters was the first white baby girl born out in that area. So they were there in the original years. So I'm quite fascinated by what I found. I'm going to try to, maybe I'll just start at the top left of the screen. And I won't lie that when I found this postcard in this album, I was a little bit aghast. I was kind of shocked, and I almost wanted to close it because it has the swastika on it. And of course, our experience is that that's a very negative symbol, and it didn't make sense that it was on a postcard for a little baby girl. But then when I did my research, I learned back in the early 1900s that this symbol was a Sanskrit meaning was for good fortune and well-being. Now, these albums that I have, there's probably 30 to 50 postcards in each album. I only went through one of them and pulled some out. Most of them had been mailed. It had been through the Postal Service. Usually, most of them were from Washington or Idaho. The majority of them were sent to my aunt. And I think what was really interesting is the postmarks on these fall in the range of 1906 up to 1911 or 1912. And a lot of them were written to her, which she would have been just a little tiny girl. She would have been 1 to 5 years old when she got these. And when I read the messages on the back, they're written to her like she was an adult, and they're written in this beautiful cursive. And it was really quite interesting to see that there was no age gap. And most of the messages are from her aunts and uncles. About half of this collection were actually postcards that were written to her father, Eli Morgan. This one was the most shocking, that pink one. I'll get that one out of the way right away. The next one going over is this leather, which of course I had totally forgotten about, Kathy, because these weren't in the albums. But as I was researching postcards, the leather concept came up, and I forgot I had them. I actually have 3 of them, and they actually went through the Postal Service. And I'll just give you a little bit of the history on these leather postcards. They were a short-lived fad, popular in the United States between 1903 and 1907. Generally, they were made from deer skin and decorated with pyrography, meaning the designs were burnt in, or they used ink. And they became a really popular collector's item, especially among women, who then would eventually sew them into decorative items like pillows. And while the fad was brief, the leather postcards remain a collectible item. Some were even made with holes already punched in them to make sewing easier. They were banned by the US and Canadian Postal Services around 1907, somewhere between 07 and 10, because the leather damaged the sorting machines, and stamps would not, now this is really critical because it's hilarious, the stamps would not stick properly. But I thought that was really funny because all 3 of the leather ones I have, they're almost 120 years old, and the stamp is still stuck on. So I found it interesting that they shut it down because the stamps wouldn't stay on, and yet they've maintained that. I've got 3. They're typically done in a humor way. There's usually a joke or something on them, but and not only are they sending out this little funny message, they actually would write on them somehow. And I can still read the writing. I can still see the postmark on this leather, clearly see the date. What I've noticed on some of these is not only did they stamp the date, they stamped the time of the day when these postcards were sent. So these 3 are definitely my favorite. Not sure what I'm going to do with them over time. The next set to the right there, I've got 2 of these black and white ones, and these are from a photographer named Stanley Johnson out of Wisconsin. And in 1909, he copyrighted and published what was called his first real photo postcard. And he had a creative idea that he started to sell these as exaggerated images. So what you'll see is, for example, on the second one, you'll see the car, and in the back of the car, there's 3 apples. And then he didn't do this for very long. He didn't do very many. There's an entire website that I found online featuring these postcards. They were called something called an exaggerated type of postcard, and Johnson himself called them novelty freak postcards. I need to do more research on these because I don't think there's very many. I'm not sure if these are originals or reprints, but they did go through the post office in their day. I don't know what the dates on this one is. 1911, they actually went through the post. Let's see, what else did I have in here? Is all my stuff on one slide, Kathy, or is there others on another slide?
No, it's all on one
It's all on
slide.
one. Okay, I just want to check.
Here.
And I do want to point out, because this one isn't on there, but this little one here is the oldest one I have. It's copyrighted from 1905. It's titled Peekaboo. It was copyrighted in somewhere in New York. And it actually wasn't mailed to my great aunt until 1908. And I'm pretty sure this is the oldest one I have in this book. The other ones down in the bottom left there, I thought were really interesting because some of them are cardboard. And then on the front, the one with the kittens, the cardboard is flat, but the kittens, now I thought maybe it was felt, but perhaps it's embroidery. I'm not 100% sure, but the quality of the kittens is absolutely unbelievable. And the fact that almost 120 years later, the quality is still there. And then the other one there with the Santa and the girl in the purple dress, that card is a slightly different design in that it's part of the image is embossed. It's been pushed in and imprinted in there. But the dress on the girls and Santa's hat and jacket are actually fabric. And they're absolutely beautiful. Like you have to have them in your hand to really appreciate it for sure. One of my favorites, and I guess because it's that time of year, is the Santa painting the little house. But the detail and the quality of this one, I almost think I should hang these up somehow, the really amazing Christmas ones over the holidays, because I'm quite impressed. And Kathy, I'm going to need your help because I don't know what to do with these and how to preserve them, but I definitely don't want to mess these up.
Just throw them out. No,
I need, not throw them out, mess them up. I don't want to mess them
up. Yes.
Yeah. The one I think that might be my favorite is the little girl in the pink bonnet. And I'm not sure why, but the quality of this one, but her eyes are so intense. The blue of her eyes make this like a photograph in 2025. And, when I look at this and I think about how old it was mailed in 1910. A lot of the ones you're seeing on this slide are most of them produced in Germany, and the quality is incredible. Anyway, there's something about her blue eyes that kind of blow me away. The other one that I was quite surprised by was the horse, and that little side there, which is the saddle and the hat and the polo. It's for playing polo, the game of polo, but that gold part is actually a layer of stuff, and the ball and the thing on the saddle are actually little round things attached to the postcard. I know the visual is not really doing it any justice, but again, this one also went through the mail. I don't know how this got through the sorting machine, but again, it was mailed from Spokane to somewhere in either Washington or Idaho, I anticipate. So what else did I want to share about these cards?
Do you want to talk a little bit about the three pictures that are the one of the actual album and the way they're held in the album?
That's the one thing that hasn't fared very well is the actual album cover. It's literally disintegrating. Inside the pages, the black pages are holding it together a little bit better. I definitely need to figure out how to store these a bit differently going forward. The cards are maintaining their quality really well. I do believe I have a total of 3 albums of postcards. I probably have close to 100, if not more, of these postcards that and somebody mentioned emotional inheritance. I'm thinking, I haven't dealt with these because I haven't dealt with my grief. And so I got to get brave. But I also have learned more recently that by digging into this stuff, as much as it digs through my grief, it also will lead me to my healing a little bit too. And I'm getting closer to being ready to do that. But it's and just to honor my aunt, she had a very tragic life. And the fact that she kept these postcards and handed them off to her family In the end, she had one son. Her son died tragically in a car accident in 1980. Later in her life, and she had two grandsons that basically had no contact with her. She was not a warm, fuzzy woman. She was a stern school teacher who basically had to give up her career because she got married. You weren't allowed to teach and be married. And I think I just want to honor her as somebody who I maybe didn't know as well as I thought. And I think by going through these postcards, it's allowed me to shed a little bit light on her in a different way. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do this time of the year.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jamie. This is wonderful. And I think someone commented, or Barbara commented, we might need to explore more about postcards and what to do with them. But just, I think with the collection Jamie has, the art impresses me so much. And then to have that tied with family history, it's just amazing. So thanks so much, Jamie. I really appreciate you doing this for me and sharing these, and helps get them out of the box for a bit anyway. So next up, we have Paula Collins, who's joining us from Northwest Florida. Genealogy is among her hobbies. Her postcards bring back memories of the family trips she had over her time growing up, and items that she had seen or known about through her father. The memories of going to flea markets and antique shows, of him looking through postcard boxes and shadow boxes for the items he collected, including not just postcards, but including Depression glass, Campbell soup ornaments, and Royal Doulton cups and saucers. So I will turn it over to Paula to show us what she's got there.
So my collection is more of things of when I was growing up upon our trips and my dad's hobbies. My father, in the pictures down in the bottom left-hand corner, showing some of his hobbies, which was airline memorabilia, the F4 Phantom, and he got into NASCAR towards the end of his life. He passed away in 2007, and over the course of his life, he was involved with many different hobbies. He started out with military insignias, and then a group of them got together and said, we need to get an airline group together because we were all interested in that. So he created an airline hobby club in the mid 1970s. So we have the airplane postcards here of the different items that can be found that are collected by airline enthusiasts. There is a hobby club called the World Airline Historical Society, which is still going on. And there's a convention somewhere in the United States, usually in the summer. And there's some smaller groups at different times. My dad worked for the railroad. He was originally a chassis system person, C&O Railroad. And so hence we do have the railroad postcards. And then over time, when we go to these conventions somewhere in the United States, he fell in love with our trips, either falling in love with a city, such as if we went to Denver, we would do a trip to Mesa Verde, down to the Grand Canyon and back up. So we would go to not Glacier, that was another trip. So we have Mesa Verde, Vail, Colorado, the Silverton Durango train, and such. So we would have trip books. So upon his passing and my mother's passing, I am finding binders with the black paper with the paper corners of all these postcards. So every once in a while, I'll get one of those books and start taking all the postcards out, and I am standing front and back, labeling front and back, making it onto my nail drive. And one of the items that we had was for Jacksonville. So we have several ones up here at the top that are the newer postcards for Jacksonville. But then down at the bottom, we have the linen cards. These are the items that you can find from the 1920s through the 1940s, showing not a true picture, but a drawing picture of the area. And he had a book of 90 postcards for Jacksonville. So I scanned the front and back of these, and then I donated them after categorizing them and saving them. I donated them to the Jacksonville Beach Historical Society for their museum. And they actually have at their museum, the person who was responsible for these older postcards, they already had a small depiction for this man. They had his camera stand, and some of the artifacts that he had given to the museum. So I just enhanced their items that they had to show. So that's one thing I'm thinking is that if I have a grouping that I can really get together, maybe donate to that historical society or that place. Because like one of our trips was to San Francisco, and his favorite place was, he fell in love with the Cliffside restaurant that had gone through several lookings. We had the bigger one. It fell into the ocean with the earthquake. Then the next one came out. I think that one caught on fire. And then we got an Art Deco one in its place right now. And he fell in love with that place. So for some reason, he wanted to collect every postcard that was for that place. So when we went there, he donated all his postcards to them.
Aw.
So when you went to go check out, they had postcards. So he added to their collection upon when you checked out. They were in the case below. So, and I'm going through. So like right now, I have a whole bunch of ones for Britain. I have a quart size bag of, these are just London, England. Wow. He went, and then I got to go 2 times. So I added to this one myself too. So yes, I have to go put my money into getting the slide cover protection. Mm-hmm. I can buy like 3 or 4 of these at a time when I have money extra to go buy them on Amazon, and then have the time to scan the front and back of them. Yeah. And I have 12 books still to go through. I'm originally from Cincinnati, so I have Cincinnati. And then trips. Like when we went out, we drove to Seattle. He loved the Civil War battle sites, so we have Civil War battle sites to go through. My parents, whenever we were on vacation, we went to a lot of national parks. So I have that also to deal with. So for me, it's going through all my times of my family vacations. My mom was an English teacher. They both like history and such. So I'm just reliving all those trips I went through through the age of 24, basically. And again, on the weekends, I noted that we would go to flea markets and to antique shows. So growing up in North Kentucky, there was one in the next county over. It was like every 2 months, Burlington flea market. We would go to that. He would stop and do his thing. My mom would stop and do her thing. I had to keep an eye on both of them. Like dad's ahead, she's behind, who's where. Kentucky, down in Louisville at the fairgrounds, they would hold it on the 3-day weekend holidays. They had an antique and flea market show that took up the entire retail space. So that was 2 long convention centers along with an antique portion. Yes, it would take 2 days to walk the whole thing, and she had to do that. And then across the river in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, there was an antique flea market show that we would go to on a regular basis. So they were always looking, going through stuff, going through the boxes, seeing if he could find anything he wanted. And basically he was looking for the airline memorabilia, places that he's gone to that he really enjoyed, to add to make a book for that. So I'm hoping that we can figure out how to get this forward and on. And I would hate to lose these because I got an only daughter and she says she's not interested. So I want to document and then be able to move forward to someone who would appreciate it. So
perfect. There, I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you so much, Paula. That was great. And I don't know, I did this a little bit intentionally. The order was starting with some of the really old ones at the beginning and moving into ending with Paula's more modern ones. I'm trying to think, the breadth of postcards that exist is phenomenal. And it's just, I'm blown away. And Paul, I enjoyed that because my father was an engineer. My father and grandfather were engineers. And so all the pictures of trains are fascinating. And in a previous life long ago, I worked at an airport. So I kind of like all the plane stuff too. But and that's and again, all the stories behind them. And those of you who are lucky enough to have in your possession postcards from like the early 1900s, which Some of my research led me to find that I think they started in about 1850, and I think we've discovered, Barbara, after the Project Kid Live, when I talked about my three ways, or my three categories of postcards that I roughly came up with, that we probably have to do a little bit more in talking about postcards, and that big question that both Jamie and Paula have posed. What do we do with them now? And I think Dr. Mary Marshall, the idea to donate them to various institutions who may be interested in a particular thing is quite, I think, a really good one, because, as you say, sometimes we just can't keep everything. But it's just a fascinating history that I couldn't believe when I started looking back into just to get myself ready for Sunday's talk. The history behind postcards, and Jamie, when she shared some of the information she was finding out with me about some of her postcards, and I'm like, wow, I want to look into more of this. And then I think for those of you who have them that are from your family, that emotional connection, or as you said, Jamie, helping to process the grief by learning more about your ancestors. And I think I did a session for Jennifer. Jennifer's still here somewhere. Oh, there she is on my screen. I did a speaker's corner with Jennifer, and I talked about my grandmother, who I always sort of thought is my old grandmother who was blind. But when I did that talk, I got such an appreciation for what a strong, resilient woman she was. As much as you said about your Aunt Jamie, who went through so many tragedies in her life that I hadn't really thought about. And I just gained such a different appreciation for her and more insight that just makes me want to know more. So it was great. Do we have any questions that we need to talk about, Barbara?
Well, the chat has been wild. Usually, I don't even include the chat in the notes and whatnot, but this has been incredible over here. One of the most recent questions coming in here that Jill Swenson started again is this question of whether tin types were made into postcards. And really, I think that comes back. You talked about as early as the 1850s. It kind of begs the question of what were those postcards like as early as the 1850s? Do you know, Kathy?
Me?
Yeah, you.
I don't. I,
I thought, what, did you not hear me?
paused off there for a minute. Jamie might know. Jamie's got her hand.
I decided to do a little research before tonight. A couple of interesting things that I found. That 1905 to 1915 was considered to be the golden age of postcards. And what I found out is the concept of the first postcard technically originated, based on what I found, from Austro-German Postal Conference, the Postal Conference in 1865. And then small administrative cards came into circulation in 1869. And it was just an overwhelming response. And there were literally millions of cards sent out back in those years. Mm-hmm. And the very first postcard believed to ever be sent was mailed by a man named Theodore Hook. And he mailed the card actually to himself in 1840. And in 2002, it sold for over 45,000. Also, the other thing that I found interesting is that a person who collects postcards is called a deltiologist. I don't think I pronounced it right. Is that right? Is that how you say it, Kathy?
I'm not sure. I've never heard that term. Now I'm going to have to look it up and put it in the
type it into. I'll type it into chat.
If you've got a nifty link somewhere, yeah, drop it into chat, and I'll include that, and we can all learn how to practice saying deltiologist. I was having trouble with that. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm curious if anyone's ever seen one of these cameras that Kodak made that made the postcards. I read about that was a consumer, and not every consumer. Photographers would go around in the countryside and take those pictures. It was kind of like being a a preacher on the circuit, right? You're a photographer who would go along the train lines, train tracks.
Thank you,
right? But I've never seen those cameras. I'm really fascinated by the technology because you only have that one image. There's no negative, right?
It was like Polaroids. Yeah.
Yes. So it's fascinating because they're all originals. and
Yeah.
there was no printing involved. It's just the photo processing right onto the
You
cardboard.
know, I have a postcard that I didn't feel comfortable enough to share because I hadn't done enough research behind it, and I took a peek and it was way more than I could handle. It's of the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, which is funny. You were talking about the sale, now used as a regular retail
Mhm.
space. And it is a postcard photo of my grandmother and her sister, my great aunt, sitting on top of a camel at this 1904 World's Fair, which was a big deal for a whole bunch of other
Yeah.
reasons. It's just why it was over my head
Mhm.
to just crank out a post. This is so exciting.
And the
Wow.
story behind the camel. And
It,
I have one of my and Jamie's grandfather, who was in World War One in the British Navy. They hadn't come to Canada yet, and it is the picture they took of him in his Navy uniform, presumably before he shipped out, is actually a postcard, and a big one of that picture hung in my grandparents' house forever. And I think one of our cousins has it now. But it was actually from a postcard that they took of him in his uniform, and the history in those photo comments. Dr. Mary commented that she had seen some made out of tin types that were made into small postcard like images. So.
that's a
And I believe
clue we can
I
do
will
some more
have to
research
look,
on.
but I feel like I've seen, but it would be more modern, a tin postcard. It might be in one of
Yeah.
these boxes behind me somewhere.
I have a tin print, a print on tin that I treated as simply a tin type. I don't know what I'm doing, put it away. My wonderful cousin, my wonderful niece, Gualana Lamel in Portland, Oregon, also turned it up in a thrift store. So I'm going to go dig for that too. And maybe it really is a postcard. It's a piece of
Oh,
tin. I assumed it was, a precious, would never survive the mail, but maybe it
hmm.
would.
Well, I think it's interesting,
Yeah,
as
maybe
Jamie
it
said,
would.
with their leather
Yeah.
ones that they stopped using because they weren't durable enough. Yet all of hers still have postage on them. So,
Well,
Right.
actually, you know what is they probably didn't introduce the sorting machines until much later. And the sorting machine suddenly made all of these crazy, form factors. Just sorry, you can't do that anymore. It's just logic.
oh,
But ah,
no, it's going to take me too long to find. I have one from England from 1969 where it's one of the, okay, my chair is stuck now. One of the Queen's, oh, sorry, King's Guard now, but back then it was the Queen's Guard with googly eyes stuck on it.
okay. So
I was
listen,
9 at the time, so it was cool.
Well,
so
I
I think
confess, I've always collected postcards as an ironic thing. All of the strange and quirky, right? I never knew any of the people. I would just collect the strangest things. I have some really strange postcards, but I
That
never
sounds
knew
like
I
another
was
whole chat.
collecting them. Yeah, right. They
listen,
really
everyone,
reflect your personality. So Paul is onto something in looking at her photo
definitely.
Yes.
collection. You really get to know a person, right? You really would know how strange I am by looking at the postcards I have kept for myself.
But in
Uh,
all seriousness, at the end of the day, as we are doing family history, as we are looking back to ancient ancestors, or very recently are studying ourselves, looking back at an artifact, and honestly, anything you've collected,
Mhm.
looking at it thoughtfully and like a curator in an exhibition, and understanding what the narrative arc is, what the story is from the artifacts. That's what's
mhm,
so brilliant. And I have to yeah, I have to bring this to a close tonight, just because there's so much more here. And what it tells me is at least two things. One is, wow, thank you. This is going to be an amazing recording.
mhm,
But also, we need to do another talk, probably multiple additional talks, if not a whole gosh darn series about postcards or
mhm.
collectibles, because there's so many layers to this. Jennifer's popped in here to say, well, what about business cards? Absolutely. Just what the different business cards have been over time, and almost anything one collects. each of these steps just gives us a whole new view as to who we are, who our loved ones were, and what it tells us about it. I can't thank all of you enough, Kathy, for just putting together a fantastic panel. All of you as speakers, and what generous, warm contributions all of you have made as comments. I'm going to sneak into the notes. Jane, you've been very quiet. There you are, talking about your treasure box. To me, this was one of the first things that started the whole idea, was this treasure box that you have inherited, which is itself a collection of these pieces. It tells us really all the different directions that we can take all of this, because here's the secret: at the end of the day, it's really all about encouraging each other to get those stories told. So, yeah. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Anything
Thank
else
you.
you want to add, Kathy, as we wrap this up?
I think that's perfect. I think that's a perfect closing, because we talk about the stories we want to share. And thank you all for sharing those stories, and gives us so many levels. But thank you all so much for sharing your stories, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And
Thank you.
again, if there's anything we've missed or ideas you have for more, don't hesitate at all to share it in the notes, share it with your friends, tell other people about it. It's a big open club. It's all free, supported by our patrons, our very generous patrons, to just keep doing what we're doing and pulling on those strings. All of these turn out to be amazing heartstrings. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.